huge thanks to OK Jazzy. They're your go-to for the 2026 World Cup and an incredible retro archive. They've got decades of iconic league classics, from legendary 90s designs to the rarest club heritage kits. Whether it's a high-performance player version or a timeless vintage look, prices start at just £15, 4.5 Trustpilot rating and fast shipping. Use code Chris for 8% off and grab your piece of football history now.
Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League predictions. This, of course, is match week 1 of the 26-27 campaign. Of course, all football fans cannot wait until the brand new season starts. Well, it gets off underway on Friday evening. Now, please do get involved in this show. Put your score predictions in the comments section below. It's great fun. We're live on YouTube, live on X and Facebook. My name is Chris Cowling, and this evening I'll be joined by Gareth McGuinness. Now, the new season kicks off on Friday. Arsenal take on Coventry. 5 games will take place on Saturday. Hull City v Manchester United. Everton take on Crystal Palace. Ipswich against Sunderland. Nottingham Forest take on Leeds. And Brentford take on Tottenham in the late kickoff on Saturday evening. 3 games take place on Sunday. Brighton take on Aston Villa. Manchester City against Bournemouth. And Newcastle take on Liverpool. And then it's Monday Night Football. Fulham against Chelsea. Gareth, good evening to you. How are you?
All good, Chris. I'm very excited for the start of the new season, of course. It's very, very close now. It all kicks off on Friday night at the Emirates, Arsenal Coventry. Of course, Coventry will be looking to pull off a big shock. But listen, it's been a nice summer in terms of we had the World Cup. So it hasn't felt like the football's been off the screens for too long. But as you can see, and obviously we discussed on Monday night on the transfer show, it seems to be getting busier and busier now as we go towards the end of the deadline. So teams are starting to pencil in what kind of squads they're going to have for this upcoming season. I definitely think it's one of the most wide open Premier Leagues we've had for quite some time, for a number of reasons, which I'll explain as the show goes on. But definitely feels like it's very much up for grabs this year for any team that really wants to go and get involved.
Which club are you talking about?
Well, of course, Arsenal's going to be the favourites based on them being the champions, most settled squad. Man City, I don't think are going to be as competitive as they've been under Pep, which is natural. New manager, they've lost. Usually we've seen it with Arsene Wenger, we've seen it with Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp, we've seen it with Sir Alex Ferguson at Man United. When you lose such a big, influential manager, it often takes time to recover. Liverpool haven't done enough, in my opinion. They kind of get themselves in a Man City's place. So I think that leaves it open for the likes of Man United, Chelsea, Aston Villa, Newcastle, perhaps even Spurs. Who knows? But look, it's definitely. I don't think there'll be too many teams that don't think they've got a chance of getting under the top 4, of the teams I've mentioned there. Spurs, Villa, Newcastle. They might even be teams outside of that might think this is an opportunity, due to the fact that if you were going to name a top 4 now, you'd probably only say Arsenal are definitely going to be in it, because I think there's question marks around the rest.
It's a big, massive changes to a lot of big teams, Gareth, isn't it, this summer? Like you mentioned there, Pep Guardiola leaving City. They've had a number of, big players leave, including Rodri. When you have Rodri and Pep Guardiola leaving in the same transfer window, Chelsea, of course, new manager there, new manager at Liverpool, Andoni Iraola, who, you and I raved about, during his time at Bournemouth. So, if I was to ask you, because there's been a lot of transfers, of course, the transfer window is open for another 13 days at the time of recording. And yes, there has been a lot of activity. We do expect a lot more activity with a lot of the bigger clubs in the Premier League. But if I was to ask you now, who do you think has won the transfer window going into this brand new season so far?
I'll probably change my mind in 13 days' time, but just based on the time of recording and the news that's broke today, probably say, in terms of value for money, I would say Man United, because they brought on Andre Santos, Yuri Tielemans, and it looks like today, Carlos Baleba from Brighton, roughly for a combined total of 150 million for 3 players. And those 3 players improve that midfield. But do you think they'll be the winners by the end of the window? Probably not. I do expect Spurs and Liverpool to be quite busy over the next sort of 13 days. I think Chelsea could potentially be busy as well. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Arsenal. Of course, news is broken today about Konza. I think that's a great sign, but it's another defender, and whilst Konza is a good defender, and it gives them more depth, Arsenal's shortcomings could be in the forward area. So I think Arsenal will, if they can't get a forward, that could be the reason that they don't go on to they won the Premier League again, because I think that is the area that they're weakest on. We know they've got depth in midfield, and Bruno Guimaraes is a great signing, and we know that Konza is a great addition, but they've already got quality in that defence. So the one area that they really lack for me is left side and striker, and the fact that they haven't done any business in those areas so far, I think that gives the rest of the league some hope that whilst they will be strong at the back, will they come unstuck in games that they can't maybe score goals in. So I think it's very, very intriguing. But out of those big clubs, I would expect Spurs and Liverpool to be the busiest over the next 13 days.
Gareth, Jamie Carragher on Sky Sports said it's a real opportunity for the likes of Tottenham and Chelsea to be getting a Champions League spot come the end of the season. And as you and I mentioned as well on Monday, there are a lot of Premier League teams in Europe. Of course, Spurs are one of those teams not in Europe this season. What have you made of Tottenham's transfer business so far? And of course, an hour or so before recording this, we have heard the news, the breaking news from David Ornstein from The Athletic, stating that Spurs are, going for a double swoop for Manchester City pair Savinho and Omar Mamouche.
Well, it's a strange one because I can't remember it ever happening before, but I think there's actually more teams in Europe than there is out of Europe. I think there's 11 out of 20 teams in the Premier League in Europe and 9 outside of Europe. So it's to be in the minorities quite tells its own story of how poor we've been over the last couple of years. But conversely, as Jamie Carragher says, it gives us a big opportunity in terms of, we've seen it last year with Man United. They only played 40 games because they went out in both cup rounds at the first opportunity. Whilst we don't want that to happen to Spurs, we've seen the benefits of not having too many games. In my opinion, Spurs should still be able to have a decent cup runs and combine that with a good league season. It's not acceptable to go out in the second round of the Carabao Cup to Charlton, and it won't be acceptable to go out in the third round of the FA Cup in January when the opponent's known. We've got to make the most of that. When Man United went out to Grimsby last year, they were a laughingstock. Yes, they went only finished third, but it still wasn't a nice moment. So we've got to make sure that we get, we've ended that trophy drought in Bilbao. Chris, of course, we remember it fondly, but we haven't won a domestic trophy since 2008. So it will be a great opportunity to combine a cup run with that league run this year. In terms of transfers, of course, you says there in the last sort of hour or so, we've heard that Savinho, I've never heard of him, by the way, at all, and Marmish have been linked. But it's probably the worst kept secret that we've got an interest in Savinho.
Over a year.
Yeah, I think it was June or July 2025 was the first story. We've been chasing this fella for 14 months. And oddly enough, he doesn't seem to be that much in favour at Man City. You would feel it would be a straightforward deal to do, but for whatever reason, it's become quite complicated. Of course, we were speaking on Monday about Cody Gakpo, but the Marmoush one gives me more excitement than Cody Gakpo would. I do think that Marmoush has got potentially a higher ceiling. Now, I've seen another report saying it could be all three of them. Me worry about that is I feel that Marmoush is more of a left-sided player that can play through the middle, more so than an out-and-out number 9. I would rather sign Savinho, Cody Gakpo, and a striker. Sorry, Savinho, Marmoush, and a striker, rather than Savinho, Gakpo, and Marmoush as a striker. If you get me, I don't want to see Savinho or Gakpo and Marmoush come on. I think there's too many similarities there in terms of they both prefer playing off the left and can both do a job, as they say, through the middle. I would rather have an out-and-out number 9 alongside Marmoush. And listen, I've made my points on Savinho before. I do think that we could potentially regret this transfer. I think there's better value out there. I'm not sure the player is suited to the Premier League, despite having a lot of talent and ability. But I think that's one that we're going to have to accept as definitely being done. But if I had a choice between Gakpo and Marmoush, or Marmoush and another striker, I would definitely go down the route of Marmoush and another striker.
Gareth, it has been reported in the last hour that Omar Marmoush is currently on £295,000 per week at the Etihad, and Marmoush is earning the 7th highest wage in the Premier League at the moment. So that is going to be an interesting one, because if Spurs want him, they're going to need to break the bank for him, and we have seen Spurs break the bank already a couple of times in this summer transfer window with Fernandes £85 million, Sandro Tonali £100 million package, paying top wages. So let's.
It seems to be that it's completely reversed now, because Conor Gallagher signed on big wages, Xavi Simons signed on big wages, Fernandes, Tonali, Van de Ven's got a brand new contract, one of the top earners. So from not really paying big wages, they all of a sudden. The worry would be with players like Marmoush is, yes, they've got ability, but if he comes in on that kind of wage, if he doesn't produce, it's going to be difficult to get rid of him, because he's on such big wages. If he's on £300,000 a week, we've seen this at Man United with Rashford, and if Rashford for me is a level above again, and look at the trouble that Man United have had trying to get a buyer. Yes, there's issues with his attitude, but I would say most of it's down to the wages. If Rashford had just those attitude problems, but he was on £50,000 a week, I think teams would be more teams taking chances on him. I think it's because of the wages. Is potentially the reason that they can't shift them. So if Spurs really want this player, they've got to be sure and do their due diligence that they think long term he could be a good fit. But I do think he is a very talented player. But as I says, I hope he's being signed in the position that they're looking at Cody Gakpo for, and not, because I do think, Chris, a front three of Savinho, Cody Gakpo, and Marmoush for the money being outlaid won't represent great value for money. I think you're talking in the round of £250 million there, just on transfer fees alone, plus whatever the wages they would be on. Are we getting value for money with those three players, or is there better out there? So, in my opinion, Savinho, Marmoush, and another striker that's an out-and-out number 9 could potentially be a better way to go.
Well, any transfers made before Friday's deadline, 12 noon, I believe it is, those players can then be in those squads. So it'll be an interesting one. We'll talk more about Tottenham shortly. Gareth, just want some quick answers here. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I want your bold predictions. I know you said it's difficult to try and predict the top 4 or 5, but who will win the Premier League at the end of the 26-27 campaign?
I hope the answer changes in a few weeks' time, but I would have to say at the minute you can't look past Arsenal.
Right, let's move on very quickly. The top 5. Predict the top 5, so 2nd to 5th.
Very difficult, actually. I'm gonna go Man United 2nd.
Okay.
Liverpool 3rd. Chelsea 4th. Tottenham 5th.
So Tottenham with Champions League football.
Yeah. And I'm basing some of these predictions on what I might think happen over the next couple of weeks, to be honest. So you'll have to ask me again when the transfer window closes.
Oh, we will, and I'll replay this clip to you, and you'll cringe at the end of the season. I've no doubt. Who's going down?
I think Hull City are going to be in huge trouble, based on what I've looked at prior to the show in terms of business being done. I don't think they've got any stronger, really, at all from last season. And we've seen this, I think, was it last year? I can't remember who it was. Now it was a team that never competed at all. We've seen this recently with teams like Burnley and Sheffield United anyway, and Luton Town, and they've come up, and whilst it's been brilliant for them, they haven't really competed. So I think Hull's going to be first down. I think Coventry might make a fuss of it, but I think they'll go down as well.
Will Ipswich stay up?
Yeah, Southampton was the one. Thanks, Kelvin. They really struggled the last time. Ipswich. I'm going to say Ipswich will stay up because I don't think all three will go back down. I think Coventry. I think Ipswich have a new manager in place. Kieran McKenna stepped down, so I think they'll give him time. I think Frank Lampard will be under pressure from the get-go because of how long it's taken Coventry to get to the Premier League. Ipswich have went down and come back, and they've been pretty solid. I think with Coventry, Frank Lampard's got to start well, or they'll just press the panic button. Ipswich are going to stay up at the expense of Sunderland.
Sunderland?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big call.
I think they're going to be the team that struggles most with
after their very impressive season last year.
A couple of fortunate results, but I think there was a massive overperformance as well. And whilst it was excellent for them, and I would love to see them stay up because they are a good addition to the Premier League, I think that they're also in Europa League as well. So there's other teams in Conference League, but Europa League is not going to be easy for Sunderland. I know they've tried to improve, but the squad that they have, the competition that the teams that they'll play in the Europa League group stages compared to maybe some of the other teams playing the conference will be a level above. They're not used to it. I can just imagine a bad start and them it being quite difficult for them. So I'm going to say it'd be easy to come on here and just say the three teams. So I'm going to take a chance and say Ipswich will stay up and Sunderland will be the surprise package going down.
Yeah. Fair play, Gareth. I think most people, if I'd have asked that question, would have just said, yeah, the three coming up are going to go back down. So
maybe the Sunderland don't go down, but I do think they're one to watch. I think they're potentially a struggler.
Before we get into the predictions and the 10 fixtures for this coming weekend, who do you think will be the top goal scorer at the end of the season? And who will be the first manager to get sacked or leave?
I think it's between two players, really. Richarlison and Erling Haaland. I can't quite pick between the two at the minute, but
I knew you were going to say it too.
I would be surprised if it wasn't those two at the end of the season. Now, in all seriousness, I think Erling Haaland will probably have it wrapped up come Christmas, to be honest, just based on how many goals he'll score. I don't actually think Man City will have a great season, but I just think Erling Haaland will guarantee goals. So Erling Haaland with Mo Salah out of the league now, injury. There's a few concerns around Saka. How many games will he play? Don't really see Havertz or Gyökeres. I think Arsenal share their goals around. Sesko, not convinced that Man United. Isak could be a potential player. The only reason I wouldn't put him on there is his injury record. You wouldn't back him to stay fit all season. So I think Erling Haaland's got to be top goal scorer.
And the first manager to be sacked or leave?
I think it's between two or three. I'm going to put the Sunderland manager in there, De Vries, just based on I think they might struggle. And
he's got it in for Sunderland this evening, eh?
No, nothing to do with. I actually like Sunderland. Just based on the expectations from last year. Maybe they will give him some time just based on the European, but I think it could be a big struggle.
Who are the others? You said two or three. Who are the others?
Frank Lampard. I think Coventry will panic early. And as I says, just be Sunderland. I think you can be a victim of your own success sometimes. We've seen this with Pochettino with Spurs, and I think Coventry, Lampard getting them up if they aren't going well to start, they'll remove. And they are one I'm going to throw out there just because I think they might have a difficult season. is Enzo Maresca. How patient will Man City be? I think he's unlikely to be the first manager sacked because, I mean, they would have to have a horrific start. But it wouldn't surprise me if he was sacked during Christmas time. If they didn't, all right, they'll give him time, but Man City can't be not finishing in the top 4 or 5 teams. I think that'll be a big, big problem with Man City.
Yeah.
And I think losing Rodri, if anything was to happen there in Holland, you look at that Man City team and think, well, where's the star quality gone?
Yeah.
Because Bernardo Silva's left as well, so it's a all change at Man City.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Gareth, because the Community Shield, Arsenal were very comfortable winners. And when you think that City were the closest team to competing with Arsenal last year for the Premier League title, the fact that they're letting all these players go out the door, and of course they've lost Pep Guardiola as well, I think it is going to be a very, very different Man City. But right, let's get into talking about this weekend's fixtures. The first game of the new 26-27 campaign will take place at the Emirates Stadium. Arsenal will host Coventry City. Do you know the last time that these guys or these teams played each other in a Premier League game? February 2001. Arsenal winning 1-0 away. Now, Arsenal and Coventry City have faced each other on the opening league game of the season once, and that was back in 1993. And Coventry won 3-0 at Highbury thanks to a hat-trick from Mick Quinn. Now, this is the first Premier League meeting between Arsenal and Coventry since February 2001. And like I just mentioned, a 1-0 win for the Gunners at Highfield Road. Since Coventry did the double over Arsenal in the 93-94 campaign, they have won just one of 14 top-flight meetings, and that is 5 draws and 8 defeats, a 3-2 win on Boxing Day in 1999. Now, Gareth, how do you see this game going? And it's worth mentioning as well that Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta has won 149 of his 248 Premier League games in charge. Victory here would see him become just the 5th manager to reach 150 victories in fewer than 250 games in the competition, after Pep Guardiola, 204, Jose Mourinho, 231, Jurgen Klopp, 237, and Alex Ferguson, 247. I'm going to go early here. I think that this is going to be a comfortable win for Arsenal. I hate to say it, but I do think it's going to be a comfortable win. I'm going to say 3-0. What are your thoughts?
Well, it was interesting there. You said the last time the two teams met at Arsenal's place, Coventry ran riot. So I don't know if that's something that the players will
that
look at.
was in 1993. You weren't even born.
No, but I mean, if I was Frank Lampard, I'd be playing the DVD this week, showing the players and get a motivation to look, this is possible, because I'm sure Arsenal had a good team in 1993 as well. So you never know. It's the first game of the season. I think everybody would love to see it, not just Tottenham fans. I think everybody connected with football would love to see Coventry get something. The question is, are they good enough? There's some question marks around that back four of Arsenal with Saliba out. So I think Coventry could potentially make it competitive.
Do you?
Yeah, just based on the fact that Arsenal don't. I know they blew Man City away in the end up, but you think back to that last game of last season. Arsenal just had to beat Burnley. They won the league, and everybody was going 5, 6, 7. It was 1-0, and Arsenal were hanging on at the end against an already relegated Burnley. They're not the type of team that usually wins by heavy scorelines. They tend to dominate matches without scoring. But I think Coventry could potentially cause an upset here on the opening night. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Really? A 1-1 draw?
I just think first game of the season, everybody's expecting Arsenal. They come out and blow them away. I think Arsenal, I just have a feeling Coventry could get something.
Yeah, Philip says here, I think Coventry will surprise a few. But Philip also says here, Coventry 14-1 to win. I might put a bet on. Rob here says 3-0 Arsenal. Simon says 5-0. Paul says 4-0.
Listen, I backed Arsenal more times than enough last season. It's not me just trying to wind up. I do generally think there's danger playing a newly promoted team. Arsenal, remember playing Brentford. I think they got beat. So, there is I don't always like playing a newly promoted team on the first weekend. So, and I think Friday night, Sky cameras, Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville will be dancing up and down if Coventry get a result. So, I
I
think
really do. I really do hope you're right here, but I don't know whether I should read this stat out or not. Since the start of the 23-24 campaign, Arsenal have won 17 of their 18 Premier League games against promoted sides.
yeah, but this won't be one of them.
I hope you're right, Gareth. I really do. Right, the next one is the early kickoff, 12:30. Hull City take on Manchester United. Of course, Hull City have just come up from the Championship. Michael Carrick at the helm for Manchester United did very, very well last season. Now, the last time that these teams met in the Premier League was February 2017, and that was a 0-0 draw at Old Trafford. Hull City are winless in all 10 Premier League meetings with Manchester United, drawing 2 and losing 8. The joint most they've faced a side without winning, along with Chelsea, also drawn 2, lost 8. The Red Devils have only faced Charlton 16, QPR 14 and Birmingham 14, more often without losing. Manchester United have never lost in the top flight when facing a newly promoted team in their first game of the season, winning 9 and drawing 3. With this, the first instance since the 2010-2011 season when they won 3-0 against Newcastle United. You just said there, you think that Manchester United will finish second. So you think that Carrick is going to have a really good season at Old Trafford?
Well, I think that midfield that they've got now is potentially very, very strong with Santos, Baliba, Tielemans, brilliant experienced player. You've got Kobe Mainoo there, and you've got Bruno Fernandes there. I mean, that's as strong as that's all strong players. There's 5 players you can pick from. And they seem to have, where they lack that little bit of mobility and energy in midfield, they seem to have found that now with some of the signings they've made. So I think they've got stronger there. I think they'll sign a left back as well before the window's over. So best down the prediction. And I think with Mbumo and Cunha, you've got 2 of the best wide forward goal scorers around.
Yeah.
One area of concern would be through the middle. Although Sesko did improve in the second half of last season, I still think he's not quite ready to be, matching Erling Haaland. But I think United potentially could have a very good season. And whilst they say second, and it might seem like that's a brilliant season for you, I just think because it's so open that a lot of teams could potentially finish second. So I've just put them on there. But I'd be surprised if United didn't finish in the Champions League spot. I think they'll be definitely in the top 5. And I think although this could be a tricky start, like I said with Coventry, I think these danger written all over these games.
So DJ9053 says 2-1 Hull City win. Anne Evans watching on Facebook says 4-1 United. Simon Price 3-0 United. And Paul says 2-1 United. Before you give me your score prediction here, Gareth, in their last Premier League campaign back in the 2016-17 campaign, Hull City conceded more goals than any other side, 80 goals. Indeed, they lost their last 3 games back-to-back by an aggregate score of 13-1. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Manchester United win. What are you going to go for?
I remember that season. I think Hull, when they got relegated, they completely downed. I remember Spurs scoring 7 on the last day at Hull. I think that might have been the last time they were back. As it says with that Arsenal Coventry game, the first weekend throws up a lot of funny results. And I've already said this a few times, Chris. I think the first few weeks of this season, particularly, is going to throw up really funny results because of a lot of the top nations got to the end of the World Cup. Players haven't been training; they've been away on holidays. Teams have had disjointed pre-seasons. I think it favours these teams that are maybe haven't had as many players away. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw on this one as well.
Wow. Okay. Right. The next one, Everton against Crystal Palace. And I've got one name here, Brennan Johnson.
This is the one that got absolutely pelted on TalkSport with Jamie O'Hara says that Everton and Crystal Palace just swapped their crap. Dwight McNeil for Brennan Johnson. And Brennan Johnson replied,
He's won more trophies than Jamie O'Hara and Gabby Agbonlahor. And I've said this so many times, Gabby Agbonlahor, he goes on about, he talks about Tottenham a lot. This is Tottenham a lot about trophies. And he's never, ever won a trophy in his career. So I love the fact that Brennan Johnson shut him up in particular, but both of them really. But what do you make of that transfer? Dwight McNeil, Brennan Johnson, just a straight swap. You don't see that very often at all.
Very strange, a straight swap with no cash exchange. That's very, very strange. I know that Crystal Palace wanted to sign Dwight McNeil. I think it might have been in January, and then Dwight McNeil's wife took the social media about it, I think, and criticised that it was his dream to play for Crystal Palace. So I can only assume that he had a really bad time at Everton. Although he came back into the team and he done a professional job, I think it's potentially a better deal for Everton. When you look at which players got the most scope for improvement, you would have to say it's Brennan Johnson. So whilst it didn't work for Johnson at Crystal Palace, I don't think the fans really give him an opportunity. I think he had a target on his back as soon as he came in, because he came in on poor form for big money. So maybe Johnson, I think, has got a manager that might believe in him a wee bit more suited to his style of play, crosses into the box, direct, and David Moyes. I think it could potentially be a good move for Brennan. So really hope it goes well. And yeah, a strange one. I think Palace could love to regret that one if they had Brennan Johnson, because it might not be the finished package, but he scores goals, and Crystal Palace couldn't get that out of him. He scored plenty of goals for Spurs despite all his shortcomings.
How many goals will he score this season?
I'm going to say he'll score 7.
I was going to say 6.
Yeah, I'll give him 7. First one this weekend.
Right. Yeah, first one this weekend, exactly. Philip says here, Johnson again, ole. I completely agree. I think I'm going to give my score prediction early then. So I'm going to say 2-1 Everton. Johnson scoring the winning goal. And they're going to, they might not regret it, I don't know. But Crystal Palace have won just one of their last 23 Premier League matches against Everton. That is a crazy stat. Drawing 10, losing 12, a 3-1 home win in December 2021. Their last away win at the Toffees was back in 2014-15 season under Neil Warnock, a 3-2 victory at Goodison Park, drawing 4 and losing 7 since. And this is another crazy stat. Everton have lost their opening game in each of their past 4 Premier League seasons. So, who are you going for?
No, I'm going for Everton. I was going for Everton before you edit the stats anyway. I'm going for a 1-0 Everton 1. Brennan Johnson to score the goal. And I really hope he celebrates. I don't want to see him just no celebrating against a club that doesn't. Different if he doesn't celebrate against Spurs, but he should be jumping into the away fans if he scores in this game. So really hope Everton get off to a 1 start after Brennan Johnson's treatment. So Everton 1-0.
Right, next up, another 3 o'clock kickoff. Ipswich Town back in the Premier League against Sunderland, Portman Road. Now, the last time that these teams met was back in the Championship in January 2024. Ipswich winning 2-1. Ipswich did the double over Sunderland when they last met in the 23-24 Championship campaign. Ipswich and Sunderland have met in the opening league game of a season in 2 previous top-flight campaigns, and that was in the 81-82 season, sharing a 3-3 draw, and the other one was in the 2001-2 season when Sunderland won 1-0. So you think that Sunderland might go down. You said that Ipswich will stay up.
Well, at Ipswich, this is a 6-pointer. The loser of this gets relegated. It's the winner takes all. If Sunderland won this game, they can put their flip-flops on. They go on the beach for the next 37 games. It's funny how we spoke about that, and that's how it's panned out this weekend. Ipswich taking on Sunderland. Well, I can't back Sunderland now, can I? Have to back Ipswich.
Gareth, let me ask you about Ipswich and their transfer window, because Ipswich is a team that they know, they were in the Premier League, then got relegated. So they want to, of course, learn from that lesson again. So what have they done differently this time in this transfer window to give you confidence that they will actually remain in the Premier League for the following season?
Well, I think one of the names...
And of course, change of manager as well.
I think one of the names that jumps off the page when you look at the players they brought in, Julio Encizio. He was a very, very good player for Brighton. He's got that wee bit of Premier League quality. He can score goals. Sasa Lukic, another Premier League experienced player that came from Fulham, plenty of years in the Premier League, and that's two players that know the league and have played in the league and played in good teams as well. Fulham, steady Premier League team. Lukic was very much part of that squad over the last few years. And then Cizio, I remember that goal he scored against Man City for Brighton. I think he might have ended up at Chelsea at one point before going back to Strasbourg, Chelsea's sister club. There's quality in that player. It's just about getting the club where he gets consistency. So I think when you go back the last time, Ipswich come up with very much a similar team to what they had from the Championship. They didn't really invest in Premier League experience. So it definitely looks like they've tried to rectify that. In terms of exciting players, Fatawa, they signed from Leicester too. Another good player, can play out wide. So they've definitely done a wee bit on that attacking area with Incisio and Fatawa. They give them a wee bit more pace and quality. And as it says, out of the three teams that come up, I think Ipswich potentially have the best chance to stay up.
So new Ipswich manager Gary O'Neill won just 2 of his last 19 Premier League games in charge of Wolves between May and December 2024, drawing 3, losing 14. His last match in the competition was a 2-1 defeat against Ipswich Town. Very quickly, Gary O'Neill, a good appointment?
Yeah, fantastic appointment. I think it was a big bloody lose, Kieran McKenna, but Gary O'Neill's quite similar, I think, in his style, his personality. He's very good. We've seen at Wolves that first season. He came in just before the season started with Lopetegui leaving, and he got great results with Wolves that year. Broke down in the second year, of course. I think he was brilliant on those shows he done Monday Night Football on. He showed his tactical nous. And yes, I think he's the man that could potentially keep up switching the league. And look, one other fascinating element, because I've watched quite a lot of this player in Scotland, is Dyson Maeda. He will be a fantastic addition to the Premier League. The Celtic striker, but can score goals. Potentially join him. He could have joined the Premier League a couple of years ago, but he's very much a player that can score goals. So I think if he can start scoring goals, Ipswich have a decent chance of staying up.
Gareth, I wrote this score prediction down, which might surprise you, and then Simon Price comes along and agrees with me on Facebook. 3-3. I'm going to go 3-3.
I think Ipswich will win on the opening day. I'm going to go for 2-1. 2-1, Ipswich 1.
2-1. John, thank you so much for your lovely comments about the channel. And Adam, I love this comment here. Hopefully Spurs can spend another 200 million so Gabby Bonlahor can start crying again and moaning that it's not fair. Love that. Right, next up is Nottingham Forest v Leeds, also a 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. Oliver Glasner, good appointment?
It depends which Oliver Glasner you're going to get. Are you going to get the quality manager that we know and we've seen from Frankfurt, from Crystal Palace? Or are we going to get the Sawyer Oliver Glasner that throws his toys out of the pram when it doesn't work?
He won't get time.
No, well, that's it.
Not with that chairman.
No, not with that chairman. And to be fair, he's actually spoke quite well about this chairman because he says that he's not afraid to put his money where his mouth is. So that was a dig at Steve Parish, wasn't it? That he wasn't really doing that. So I think it's potentially a car crash for these two. A collision course, 2 hotheads. We've seen this already with Marinakis and Nuno. Marinakis and Ange, it didn't work. I think...
Have Nottingham Forest become the new Watford when it comes to managers?
It's probably an unfair comparison because Forest have actually got themselves on the Europe, haven't they? So they've probably had a wee bit more success than Watford have had. But it'll be interesting to see how they do this year now that they've no European football. And last year they came up short against Villa, but it was a very good run to the semi-final. So Marinakis, we know he's results driven. Really, he doesn't really care. But he made that remark under Steve Cooper that he wanted to see a different style of play, and then Nuno come on, and it was very similar. And then Nuno had success, and he says, "Well, I really want to change it up. I want to get Forest when he play sexy football. We want to play attacking football." And he gave Ange 7 games because he couldn't win a game. And then he says, well, forget about this. We're going back to Sean Dyche because Sean Dyche gets you results. And now we're evolved our glass. So it's very much all over the place. The main thing that Nottingham Forest is, I think you have to win and play great football, which isn't always possible. I don't know if you've watched it, Chris, but the Jose Mourinho documentary that dropped on Netflix, it was a really, really good three episodes. But Jose had said on numerous occasions he didn't care how his teams played. It's all about winning. So it'd be interesting to see if Marinakis finds some common ground with, accepting that maybe Forest won't play the greatest football, but they can get results. Because if Oliver Glasner plays great football and doesn't get results, he'll find out, he'll have the same conversation that Ange had with him. Get your coat. See you later.
So how do you think this relationship will go? Will he last the season?
No, I don't think so. I think because of the expectations that'll be on him. No European football. He's probably turned around to him and says, I expect top 6 finish. You've only got one game a week. And I think Marinakis really does believe that, along with Chelsea and Spurs, they're in that conversation. I really do think that he puts Forest on there. They're another team that will benefit with no European football. Whilst everybody's talking about Chelsea and Spurs, I think he will be in his head that this is a great opportunity for Nottingham Forest because, they were knocking on the door of Champions League football a couple of years ago. But no, I think this is an hour. Look, it wouldn't matter who was in there. I don't think it would work long term.
Right, on this game, only Wolves 6 and Burnley 9 won fewer away points in the 25-26 Premier League season than Leeds United, which was 15. Despite that, Leeds United lost only 2 of their final 12 on the road, winning 1 and drawing 9, and drew the joint most away matches across Europe's big 5 leagues last term, 9 level with Real Betis. How do you expect Leeds to do this coming season?
I think Leeds will have a very good season. I don't see them in any relegation trouble. I think they've recruited very well. I think James Trafford's an outstanding young goalkeeper.
Yeah.
I think Harry Wilson's potentially the signing of the summer in terms of they got him for free.
Yeah.
Free transfer. He was excellent last year for Fulham. Surprised that he didn't go maybe somewhere else.
And they've got a goal scorer.
And they've got a goal scorer in Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And if he stays fit. And like the way they finished the season last year, Leeds, they were box office at times. They watch as well. So no, I think Leeds will definitely be looking at mid-table finish, but potentially with one eye on can we break on the European Conference League spot potentially and maybe have a good run in the cup. So no, I think Leeds will be fine. They'll probably have a very good, good season for their kind of expectations.
Right, Gareth, of course, on Saturday, 5:30 at the GT.
All right. I'm gonna go 1 each for this game.
Sorry. Yes, I'm getting carried away. I want to talk about Tottenham already. 1-1 you're going to go for.
You're already at the GTEC?
I'm already there. Nottingham Forest Leeds. I think Oliver Glasner will get off to a winning start. I think 1-0.
Oh, he has to?
Yeah.
Oh, his coach could be waiting for him.
Right. 5:30 kickoff on Saturday. Brentford take on Tottenham Hotspur at the GTEC Community Stadium. Now, Brentford have only won one of their 10 Premier League games against Spurs, drawing 4 and losing 5. Their joint lowest win percentage against any side, 10% level with Arsenal. And Tottenham Hotspur have lost their opening game in just one of their last 10 Premier League seasons, winning 6 and drawing 3, losing 1-0 at home against Everton in the 2020-2021 season. Now, Gareth, what have you made of Brentford during pre-season? A lot of people are talking about the result, them beating Frankfurt 7-0 at the weekend. Of course, Spurs beat Hoffenheim 3-0, drew 2-2 the next day with a completely different side. Tottenham Hotspur have spent over £200 million in this transfer window so far, but there has been a lot of outgoings as well. We do expect more. We hope that there will be a lot more, particularly in the final third, a goal scorer and a winger or two. How do you think this game will go? And where do you think that these teams could possibly will finish come the end of the season?
Well, in terms of how the game will go, I hope it's better than this game last season. I think this is potentially the worst ever Premier League game I've ever watched last year. This Brentford and Spurs match at the G-Tech. I think it was around Christmas time. I think it was 0-0, and I can't remember either keeper really making a save. It was dreadful.
It was a terrible game. Vicario wasted time. Thomas Frank walked over to the away end.
And so a bit of the point.
And got booed. And most of the game, the Spurs fans were singing about every single player you can imagine. Even Soldado got a mention that evening. It was a terrible, terrible game.
It can't be that bad. Surely not. So I think in that respect, it'll be better than last year. Of course, we all want a result. Looking at Brentford, I'll speak about Brentford first, Chris, because I know we'll come on to speak about Spurs in depth. Looking at they haven't really changed a lot since last year, so kind of know what they expect. They're going to be solid. They're going to play in the counter attack. They're going to try and exploit set pieces, especially with Kabore in that long throw. But even with players missing and we haven't got our business done, I think we've got potentially better players and got to be confident we can get something. But you're looking at Callum Wilson's come on. He hasn't really had the heights of possibly his Newcastle time or his Bournemouth time, but he's been a bit of a thorn in our side. He scored goals against us in the past, Wilson. So I'm hoping he doesn't really play. Sangiari's coming from Lens. He's probably their biggest signing they did. But they haven't lost anyone, Chris. We think about Brentford, they've lost big players in the past before, and you think about the upheaval they had last year with the manager and players leaving, including Mbumo and stuff. They haven't had that this summer. So it'll be interesting to see if they're, if they can kick on. But I think they're an our team, somewhere to Sunderland. They probably overachieved last year, and you could see them coming back down a peg because of that. Don't think they'll be in any relegation trouble, but I'd be surprised if they're in a European spot. Spurs.
Can I just ask you, Jordan Henderson, a big miss for them?
It will be a big miss for his leadership, but in terms of our players they've lost and over the years, you would imagine the effect wouldn't be as big. Maybe around the dressing room and stuff, but in terms of their actual quality, I don't think it weakens them significantly. Mm-hmm. We had this first game a few years ago with Vange. It's funny how these things have a way of coming back around again. And that was a 2-2 draw. And we played quite well in that game. So I think that was the start of that brilliant Ange period. We tend to do okay at Brentford. I can't remember us losing at the G-Tech before. I think we've had a fair few draws, Chris, there. I don't remember us ever losing a game there.
And Postecoglou took charge of his first Spurs game in the Premier League. A 2-2 draw. Yeah. Let me just read you some of these stats out. 30% of Tottenham's Premier League wins last season came under Roberto De Zerbi, 3 out of 10. Despite the Italian only taking charge of 18% of our games, 7 out of 38. Following his appointment ahead of match day 32, only Brighton, 8.7, allowed fewer passes per defensive action in the top flight than Spurs, which was 9.4. And let's talk about new £100 million signing, Sandro Tonali. New Tottenham Hotspur signing Sandro Tonali, one possession overall, 147 times, and in the middle third, 87 more times than any Spurs or Newcastle player in the Premier League last season. He also averaged 16.8 forward passes and 3.3 progressive passes per 90 minutes, more than any Spurs midfielder in the top flight last term. Gareth, this is a huge upgrade with Sandro Tonali, and I've said many times, particularly during my time in New Zealand and in Australia, watching De Zerbi at work with this squad, with these players, he is improving the players week by week. You can see it. And bringing in someone like Sandro Tonali is going to make that Tottenham Hotspur midfield look very, very different.
Yeah, and especially if you pair him up with Fernandes, I think you've got a real strong spine in that middle.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm quite confident going into this game, Chris. I think we're going to get a result here.
There's nothing wrong with that. You say it like there's something wrong with having the confidence. There's nothing wrong.
I just think that De Zerbi will have it drummed into the players that starting this season. strong and fast is going to be important. And I think he will sense as well that there could be an opportunity over the first few weeks of the season to pick up and gain points on the rest of the teams. So I think the likes of Man City, Liverpool, they will get better as the season goes on. But you could see them potentially having slower starts. So Spurs can get themselves in the position where they're 9 or 10 points ahead of them after the first 7 or 8 games. And then it gives you a big cushion at some point in the season. So, and look, if you don't want to look at it now, but the finish we have to the season is quite difficult. So you want to try and really, over these sort of 30 games, build up a bit of a cushion, because in those last few games you could potentially drop some points, whether that be for a Champions League spot or potentially maybe some more. But no, I do think we've got a good record here. I think Brentford will be very much playing on the counter-attack, and if we can lock up from set pieces, I think we're going to win this game.
Gareth, ahead of this game, De Zerbi has been talking to TNT, and he said the ultimate goal at the football club is to take Tottenham to the top of the Premier League. Now, you've said that you think that Spurs, or hope that Spurs can finish 5th in a Champions League spot. What do you hope happens in the next 13 days of this transfer window to really help De Zerbi? Because we all know, you can all see, you don't need to be a Tottenham fan either to see how Roberto De Zerbi wants to play, his vision. Tottenham, it's been a very, very different transfer window so far, but these forward players for me are absolutely key for us finishing in a European spot. And, let's be frank and honest about it. It's where Spurs do belong. We do not belong 17th like we have been for the last 2 seasons. It has been very tough for us Spurs fans, these last 2 years in the Premier League.
Well, that's it. You think about how many weekends over the last 2 seasons have we celebrated victories. They've been few and far between. It's been miserable weekends. It's been hello and welcome to the Spurs. It's another defeat, and that's been the way it's been for 2 years. And you just can't imagine that was the case, under Pochettino. And then you think about the good period we had under Ange and winning that trophy in Bilbao. You didn't think the following year was going to be, losing most weeks. And, De Zerbi really pulled us out of the gutter. And the club are very fortunate that De Zerbi was able to do that, because I think for a lot of the fans had lost hope. I don't think many fans thought that we were going to stay up in the end. So we've got to make use of this, you could call it fortune, that we've, I watched West Ham last week against Burnley, and it was, it actually made me shiver in my core that it could have been us. That's how close we were to playing Burnley last week.
Very close.
And, looking at this championship, the way it started with the League Cup in the round 1 of the started 2 weeks ago. We've been very, very fortunate that we haven't dropped down. And we can't ever be in that situation again. And I think there's been a realization at the club this year that they want to do better. But as you said, Chris, these attackers have got to come on and they've got to hit the ground running. And the one area, if somebody says to me, can Tottenham go and win the league this year? I think if we could sign players like Tonali and Fernandes in the front three, there's no reason why we couldn't challenge. But the issue for me is I don't think the players coming in that area are going to be as strong as the players that have come in that area in midfield. I think when Tonali and Fernandes come in, everybody kind of sat up around the league and was all, for weeks people kept saying to me, our fans, Spurs could be dangerous this year. But slowly but surely that those sayings have kind of dried up, because they've looked at our forward options, and now when you hear Savinho and Cody Gakpo being linked, nobody really gets worried about that, because they don't really view them as top players. So I think for Spurs, they really have a special season. At least one of those 3 forward signings have got to be making all our clubs worry. And the kind of signing that everybody in the Premier League wanted Tonali. Everybody in the Premier League would have had Fernandes. I don't think a lot of the Premier League would have Cody Gakpo or Savinho. So we've got to go out and sign a real top player that nearly every club would want. And I think that can be a difference maker. I think there's one obvious player out there for me at the moment, and we spoke about it. It will divide opinion, but Marcus Rashford could be that player. He is the type of player that could take Tottenham from potentially Champions League qualification to competing at the top end of the league, because he's Premier League proven. He's a goal scorer, and he strikes fear in the opposition. And when he gets on a run of form, Chris, it can be very, very difficult to stop. So, we can all discuss about lack of options, but there is one definite concrete option that we know is available on this market.
Gareth, before we give our score predictions for this game, Brentford against Spurs, predicted 11. What's your predicted 11 for Tottenham Hotspur on Saturday evening?
Kianski in goal, Archie Gray at right back, and I've heard could be captain actually for this game. That's something that's going around. It'll be interesting to see who gets the armband for this game. Of course, the club still have to announce who's going to be replacing Romero long term, but Madison's not expected to start. Of course, Van de Ven has wore the armband, but we're hearing it could potentially be Archie Gray. I think Van de Ven could potentially not be playing as well. So some decisions to make for the manager. Archie Gray at right back. Pedro Porro, of course, not available, I don't think. Just back from the World Cup. Van Hecke and Senesi at centre back. I'm going to go. I know Senesi was away with Argentina, but he didn't really play in the World Cup, so I'm thinking that he'll play.
Yeah.
Left back, Andy Robertson. He could potentially be another player that could be wearing the armband, but I've heard it could potentially be Archie Gray. Midfield's going to be interesting. Tonali's definitely going to play. Fernandez is not totally convinced on his fitness, but I think we've got to try and find a way to get him on there. I'd like to see Tonali and Fernandez first game. And then I suppose the other big calls, who plays, does he go with Tonali further forward or Fernandez further forward and bring in Bentancur? But I think he's going to play Conor Gallagher in that role further forward. So I think it could potentially be Fernandez, Tonali, and Conor Gallagher. Oh, and this is where it gets a bit depressing. I think, can we just stop there? The front three.
Well, before you come on to the front three, James Maddison posted a picture on Instagram earlier of him smiling, and it says, "All smiles, ready for game week 1." And as you know, Gareth, there has been a lot of rumours in the past couple of weeks that James Maddison is going to be announced as Tottenham's captain for the 26-27 campaign. So, and he started against Hoffenheim. He started a game for the first time in over a year. Could he start this game?
I would be surprised, just because I've been trying to find the patterns in pre-season, and one of the patterns I've seen is definitely Gallagher playing in that role. Because I think there was a general realization that Maddison wouldn't be fit for the start of the season. It may well be. I would expect him to be on the bench and maybe come on and have an impact, but I think it's more than likely going to be Conor Gallagher. Front three, I think Mikey Moore has to play after his goals in pre-season. I think in terms of who else can we really play on that right-hand side, I think Tell's better off the left. Kudos, not fit. I think we're out of options, really, and I don't see a world in which Savinho or any player sign now before Friday at 12 o'clock. So, and at that, they wouldn't even have had a training session. So, I would be surprised if it wasn't Mikey Moore on the right, Matisse Tell on the left, and I think Richarlison through the middle. I think that's probably by default. I don't really see many other options there, Chris, to be honest, and what can play, and that would be the one worry against this Brentford team, is if we were to fall behind, other than Maddison, where's the game changers on the bench to try and change this? Who can you bring on up front to try and score? I think it's very important that we get the first goal in this game, and I actually do think it's going to be a scrappy enough affair. I don't envisage too many goals across the weekend in the Premier League. I think it could be very much low-scoring games. So I think scoring the first goal here is going to be key.
Go on then. What's your score prediction? I'm going to go for a 2-1 Tottenham win.
Yeah, I'm going to go 1-0 Spurs.
Okay, brilliant. Right, Gareth, let's move on to Sunday's games, and we'll move through these ones fairly quickly. Brighton against Aston Villa. Of course, Aston Villa, Europa League winners. Now, they have seen a few players leave this summer. Are you surprised by that under Emery?
I don't know. I guess Gabby at Bonlohur's watching, Chris. I don't know what they say here regarding Villa, because I don't want any backlash coming on the channel here. But
go on, you give it.
Listen, it's been a difficult summer for Aston Villa, and look, despite Gabby having his wee blow-ups about Tottenham, I don't really have anything against Aston Villa. Personally, I really like the manager. I think we've praised him quite a lot, Chris. Probably Areola, Glasner, and Emery being the three names that come up quite a lot in terms of praise. But I think even for Emery now, this is going to be a real test because they've got Champions League football. They've lost the whole midfield. Really is gone. Tielemans is gone. Rodgers is gone. And I believe, is it Onana and Kamara are both injured at the moment on long-term injuries. Konza is going to Arsenal. There's talk of Watkins going to Al Hilal or out to Saudi Arabia. We're talking about their whole team being ripped apart. Martinez almost went to Juventus, but there's an issue with his hand or his finger. So again, that's not good because he's a very, very good goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be very, very difficult. And if this was just, Villa were in a situation like Spurs, where they only had the one game a week, or they maybe only had Europa League or Conference League. But the fact that they've got Champions League and Premier League and all these problems they've only really brought in a couple. I was looking at it wrong, Chris. The player that jumped off the page for me was the Swiss player who had a very good World Cup, Manzambi. He could play it wider up front. Garnacho coming in, that was a strange one. I didn't really see the logic behind him. I've said before, Rashford, potentially causing problems behind this, but Rashford's got a lot of quality. I don't think Garnacho's ever really produced consistently for them to warrant taking a chance on a player like that. I know it's a loan deal. Ruggieri from Atletico Madrid, obviously he's come in and Romero's replaced him. I don't think he's a outstanding centre half. He's a decent player, but I'm looking at it at the minute, Chris. The goalkeeper come on says I think Villa are going to struggle massively to compete in Premier League and Champions League. So what is the expectations going to be at Aston Villa this season? Unfortunately, the expectations are that they're a team that have been in European football now for a few seasons. They're a team that are on the up. Gabby Bonner says they're a bigger club than Tottenham. So this is the expectation you put on yourself now, Gabby. He was saying about Tottenham finishing 17th 2 years in a row. But it wouldn't surprise you if Villa were the team this year that had the biggest drop. Maybe not on the 17th, but it wouldn't surprise you if Villa weren't in Europe next season, just based on the players they've lost, Champions League football, and the teams around them have all improved. I'm looking at that Tottenham team and I'm looking at that Aston Villa team now, and Gabby won't admit it, but I think Gabby would rather be in that Tottenham team at the moment.
I know we haven't spoke about Brighton, but I'm going to go with a 2-1 Brighton win here. What are you going to go for?
I think Villa's going to have a difficult start. I'm going to go 2-0 Brighton.
Right, Gareth, next up, Manchester City take on Bournemouth. We spoke a little bit earlier about Maresca. Are you surprised what's happening at City right now?
Not really. I think Pep and Man City was coming to an end sooner rather than later. It pains me to say it, but I think Pep is realising that Arsenal are probably in a better state as a squad right now to go on and potentially won more Premier Leagues than that Man City team are. It was going to be an hour rebuild. How long was he going to stick around for? Rodri, he always wanted to go back to Spain at some stage. Would he have stayed if Pep was there? Possibly. But based on the World Cup that Rodri had, he looked back to his best. So I think that's a huge loss. Not just, you spoke about Jordan Henderson earlier on. Rodri's influence around the dressing room, would have been really, really big as well, not just his quality. So I think they've lost almost like two players there in one. You think about our influential players, Bernardo Silva has moved on to Real Madrid, another big player for them. But these players are getting older, so it probably was time for a change at Man City. But this is the beauty in the cycle of football, Chris. Man City now have to retask and rebuild and come again under a new manager with a new squad, and try to dominate England again. It's going to be very difficult. people have criticised Maresca this week. I know, Rory Jennings has had his say on him on TalkSport as well, but I think he's going to come under. We're going to find out how well Maresca can handle the pressure this year, because listen, no matter who came in, they weren't going to be Pep Guardiola. Let's be honest. Pep's in a league of his own, really. In terms of not just winning a winning machine, but how his teams play. They won. They don't necessarily sit back and play counter attack, or they play football the beautiful way, and they won. So it was always going to be very, very difficult. But it was a job at Maresca. It was never going to turn down. I think it's going to be a difficult start because the squad's nowhere near ready. That's what makes me think, Chris, in terms of us, can Man City really afford to let these players go? Because, they're not crying out with squad depth as they used to be.
Yeah.
Unless they're going to use those funds that Spurs give them to go and buy potentially better players. But I think midfield's a massive problem. Elliot Anderson is a good player, but he's nowhere near Rodri. Nowhere near. I'm sorry. No, not even in the same breath as Rodri. Reinders has moved on as well to Saudi Arabia. Bernardo Silva's gone. Rodri's gone. I think they're weaker than they've ever been in midfield. Erling Haaland's a great striker. Semenyo can score goals. Doku's injured now as well. But I don't think that front three is as good as when you think back to the Mahrez days and the Sané days, and you had Aguero and you had Jesus, and they had so many more options. I don't really think they've got those options anymore. What's going to happen with Phil Foden? He's had a very difficult 12 months. Didn't make the World Cup, of course. Do they try and bring him back into the midfield because we know he's got quality? There's probably more questions than answers with Man City at the minute, Chris. And, Marco Rose and Bournemouth will possibly think this is the perfect time to play Man City at the start of the season.
If you were a Bournemouth fan, what would you be thinking? Because, of course, Andoni Iraola going to Liverpool, we'll talk about that game in a second. How will they cope without him? And like you've mentioned, Marco Rose coming in.
I think Marco Rose is a very good manager. And I think it's the fact that Bournemouth had it done early too. I think Bournemouth gave an absolute lesson on how they operate as a football club. They had this done as soon as Iraola was announcing. It was all done very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Methodical and well planned. And we know Marco Rose is a very good coach from his experiences in Europe. So I don't think Bournemouth will suffer too much from Iraola. I think they've got a manager in there that'll do a good job. We know the trust that's put on the recruitment system at Bournemouth. And I think they're potentially going to upset. Would it be a big upset? Of course it would be, but I think they've got every chance of going to Man City this weekend and getting at least a draw, if not 3 points. And I think Bournemouth fans will be confident of that based on what they've seen at the weekend in the Community Shield and the mess that Man City run with players.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I'm going 1-1. What are you going to go for?
I've said I don't think there'll be too many goals this weekend. This will be the outlier. I'm going to go for a 3-2 Bournemouth 1.
Okay. You've surprised me today.
Have I?
Right, Newcastle against Liverpool. Newcastle, the amount of players that they've had depart St James's Park, as well as Eddie Howe. How are they going to fare this coming season? And Liverpool, we just touched on them. Andoni Iraola taking over Anfield. Now, me and you said so many times during these shows last season that Bournemouth were the most entertaining team to watch. Is he going to take the entertainment value to Anfield with him?
Oh, 100%. Iraola's going to bring back that, what do they call it? Rock and roll football under Jurgen Klopp. I think that's what Liverpool are crying out for. A wee bit under Slot, that yes, the results weren't there, but it was the style of play that they didn't like as well. And we've seen that at Spurs, haven't we? Whilst Ange wasn't perfect, there was a lot more fans that, liked Ange's style of play. But, obviously he won the Europa League, but before that, there was a lot more fans sticking with Ange than there was with Thomas Frank because the football was so boring. So when you're playing good football, you don't always have to get results. You can kind of get away with, as long as the team's playing decent and looking like scoring goals, and you can buy yourself time as a new manager.
But will the Liverpool fans be patient? Because when you support Liverpool, they want that they want that style straight away. They want those results straight away, don't they?
It's funny enough. One of my best friends is a Liverpool fan, and I says to him, "What's your expectations for the season?" And he says to me, I think Bournemouth lost 8 games in a row at one stage last year and then went unbeaten the rest of the season. So I would take that. I says, I'm telling you now, if he loses 8 games in a row at Liverpool, it won't be the rest of the season. I says he'll be sacked. He'll be sacked on the spot. So very different expectations at Liverpool. Whilst I think they will be patient, as you says, there's a certain degree of patience that they'll give. This is a club that sacked a League One title manager, and the fans were booing him last year at the football. So these things can turn pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But Liverpool fans demanded this change. They got the manager sacked. It was them who sacked him. Jamie Carragher had said that. The club probably would have given Slot another season, but the reaction and the backlash and the boos, Liverpool notoriously don't boo managers. So they've asked for this change. They seem pretty happy with the appointment. So I think Liverpool fans have a duty now to give this time. But if you remember, Chris Iraola had a very, very difficult beginning at Bournemouth. I think it took him 9 or 10 games to win his first game. Now, he was very new to the league at the time. And Liverpool have a lot more quality than that Bournemouth team did. But I do think this is going to be a slow burner at Liverpool. I don't think it's going to come in and it's going to be all rock and roll and, at the start. Yes, they might play that way, but I think they're going to be vulnerable at the back. I think Newcastle is potentially a good opponent for them because they're another team that have had a difficult summer.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at Liverpool at the minute, and I think they're going into this season, as it stands, weaker because they've lost Mo Salah. They haven't replaced him yet. Barcola hasn't been signed. We expect him to sign, but he's not going to be in the squad this weekend. Ekatiki's injured, who was their top goal scorer last year, along with Salah. Isak, yes, has come back, but that's going to be. Chris, you probably remember. I was too young, really, but Sol Campbell's return to White Hart Lane. This is going to be summer. Isak's to Newcastle. This is going to be toxic. On Sunday, how that ended was really, really bad.
Yeah.
There's going to be no love lost there. And I think that's going to add to the atmosphere. So I think that could potentially give Newcastle a shot in the arm this weekend.
Yeah.
And whilst it's been a difficult summer, I think they're potentially playing Liverpool at the right time too. So Liverpool, I think, could be an early struggle until they get these players on, until Iraola gets his style of play. But it is really important that Iraola's start doesn't last as long as it did at Bournemouth. Otherwise, he will be under severe pressure.
Well, with that said, I'm going to go for a 2-0 Liverpool win. Isak to get a brace.
I'm going to go for a Newcastle 1. 2-1 Newcastle.
Okay. Right, finally, Monday Night Football. Fulham against Chelsea. Craven Cottage. Xabi Alonso has just taken over at Chelsea. How do you think he will fare? Will he get the time?
Well, that depends on this transfer strategy because I'm thinking Adebayor might walk on now after Henderson and Welbeck. Anyone could walk on because they've changed their transfer strategy. These kind of older players.
Yeah.
Do you think that Danny Welbeck and Jordan Henderson improved Chelsea? Not really, Chris. To be honest, I don't see the logic in that. We were very critical last year of Maddison being named on the bench as a cheerleader. Is Jordan Henderson going to be doing the same for Chelsea this year because he's not going to play in that midfield? Yes, there's talk of Enzo Fernandez going to Man City. That hasn't materialised yet, but at the minute you're looking at it, Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, and Cole Palmer. You put Jordan Henderson on that, there's a big drop off in ability. Henderson was a great player a long time ago, but those days are gone. So I don't think that signing makes much sense. Has Xabi Alonso maybe overthought it and thought, we need to go completely the other way now? Maybe he knows Jordan Henderson from the Liverpool connection. I don't know. I thought it was very strange. And then Danny Welbeck, he's done a job at Brighton, but I think doing a job for Chelsea is a different scenario completely. Yes, he's potentially a squad player, but if I was a Chelsea fan looking at those two signings, I would be scratching my head because they went out then a few weeks later and splashed 120 million on Morgan Rogers. So you don't really know what they expect in Chelsea. I think as much as they did pay a lot of money for Morgan Rogers, I think he's a top quality player. And I think he's an instant improvement on that team. I think if you've got João Pedro, Morgan Rogers, Cole Palmer, and the youngster Esteval, we've got real quality there in that final third. And that's That's probably the one area where Chelsea, if you were to give Spurs Chelsea's attacking options, I think we would potentially be in the title race. But I don't think Chelsea have great options at the back. I think defensively there's question marks. Cucurella is a massive loss, and the goalkeeping situation as well. So I think Chelsea will have to outscore teams. They won matches. I think probably high scoring games because they've got a lot of attacking quality, but defensively they're going to be vulnerable.
Gareth, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. What are you going to go for?
Yeah, I think it'll be entertaining, this game. Monday Night Football. I'm going to go for 2-2 draw.
Okay. Well, Gareth, really enjoyed today's show. I absolutely love doing these Premier League prediction shows with you, and we've done some really good ones last year. Hopefully it will continue this year, week by week, us doing the predictions after or before each match week, and reviewing the previous match week as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend. A lot of really good games there to watch over the weekend, starting Friday night, following through to Monday evening. Gareth, thanks so much, and have a good weekend.
Cheers, Chris. Same to you.
Right, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening, and please put all of your score predictions in the comment section below, and we will see you again next week. Have a great weekend, and come on, you Spurs.